Hello and welcome to Fiber Trek. It's been 2 weeks since I last recorded. I am so glad that you have stuck with me. I'm thinking that I might be able to go back to weekly per discussion with Morgan, but I can talk a little bit more about that in a fond farewell. This is episode 20. It is September 14th, and I just want to welcome any new viewers and of course my returning viewers. So glad to have you back. I've really appreciated the communication in the past 2 weeks. We've had some discussion on the boards and lots of Instagram interactions and some PMs, and those have all been, as usual, greatly appreciated. Some of you have had correspondence with me regarding this transition into grad school, and you've all picked up on the importance of the VEDBAC in my security blanket, and so this particular time, those interactions have been exceptionally uplifting and just something to look forward to that kind of pulls me out of my, as you will learn, some of my perseverating on the work that I'm doing now. I can talk a little bit more about my grad school experience at the end, so for those people who are like, whatever, I'll reserve that to an end, a fond farewell, and hopefully, I'm just going to see if I can adjust my chair properly. I'm kind of going a little casual. I've got a door over on this side, and it's really big and bright, and so I'm trying to cut that out. But I also wanted to be in a chair because of some of the stuff I'm going to do today, so you can see my kitchen. Morgan was not able to join me this week. She had some other obligations, one of them being visiting an orchard potentially, and I'm hoping she's going to bring me home some apples. But we plan to record next weekend, and she will have a Megaphone a Minute on wolves. She's been getting some resources and information, so she's been building up that content for the podcast. So she'll be back. And she's been very busy, and she will share with you some of her orders. I've been living proxy through acquisitions and discoveries through a friend of mine who has just gotten back on the knitting wagon and ordered her first sweater's worth of Peace Fleece, and also through Morgan, who will tell you of the ongoing VEDBAC saga. So we'll look forward to seeing them next week. On this edition of Fiber Trek, oh my gosh, I just went into my hostess mode of Fiber Trek. On this edition of, I guess Fiber Trek would work, we are going to cover whips, which will not look very different, spinning, and I have a textiles in time, and a fond farewell. So let's get right into it. I did want to welcome, we had an introduction on the board from Mad79, who's Melanie from the Jersey Shore. She had a really nice comment about connecting with her grandmother through some of the materials that she uses, and I think for me, that's probably my husband texting me that he's hiking out from backcountry. I think for me, and this came through another PM, one of the themes that I keep bumping into or running into with this Fibercast, as well as with Fiber Trek, the film, is the concept of connection. And I think that's what it really is about. I mean, the material obviously is very important, and I am a wool pig. Thank you very much, the Knit Girls, which is one of the best descriptors ever. But not everybody has to be a wool pig to connect with something greater. And Melanie brings that to light in her post on the introduction thread on Ravelry. So thank you so much for kind of putting that out there for me, and just, I know I've talked about that before, but I think sometimes I really get excited about the material that I work with and the history of that material, and I need that refocus, because man, I am a wool pig. But thank God, because this year I'm not buying anything. The stuff that I'm getting is coming from gifts or what have you, so try not to think about that at all. So thank you so much, Mad79, for introducing yourself on the boards and participating in the conversation. I think I did mention thank you for all the great connections, and yeah, we're going to go right into whips. So I have a nephew whose birthday is coming up, and I bought this yarn from Highland Handmaids a long time ago because I love the colorway. The colorway is Beowulf. Highland Handmaids is a local to me indie dyer, and she does some beautiful colorways, and I would encourage you to take a look at her website. She also has the Fiberista Files, which is a podcast, but I am particular to her kind of her tonals, and this is one of them. This is Beowulf, and you can kind of see it's browns and browns, coppery browns, bronzy browns. So this really appealed to me. It's a worsted weight. It's 100% wool, and it is a singles, which makes it really lofty and really soft, and it's been a pleasure to work with it. So I am making the baby latte coat. I did not bring over my bits and pieces like my iPad to show you what it looks like. But suffice it to say, it's a little baby coat. The real key element highlight on this is going to be a band, and it's braided. It's like a cabled braid, which I've done once, but note that it is not there. I had to rip it out because what I found in picking up my stitches is I did not pick up enough stitches. I need to pick up more stitches because the band was pulling it, so it was cinching down this way. So the coat was kind of going like this, and that was making me really upset. So I'm going to pick it up again and redo it. It'll get two sides, and it will have two buttons. This does have a hooded version. I did not think I had enough wool to do a hooded version, so I think I'll just make a matching hat. So I was able to get a good chunk of this done. This took me about 3 days of knitting. But the best news ever, the last class that I have on Thursday night, my professor is going to let me knit during lecture. So excited. I'm not sure if I showed this to you, but this is in my little Skein in the Big Wool Where the Wild Things Are bag. Her stuff is so lovely. Her themes are lovely. I just saw on Instagram she's going to be doing an Anna Green Gables. And I may ask my husband to take pity on me and buy me an Anna Green Gables bag, because I have her Mary Poppins bag, which I think I've shown you, but all of these classic books speak right to my heart, and I know I can't get this material, and I'm like, makes me happy. The inside is his boat. I read this to one of my clients this week, to two of my clients, Where the Wild Things Are. And so, anyway, so that should be done quick soon, and his birthday is in October, so that'll be done. And I know what you're all thinking right now, what you're always thinking whenever I show you a project that's not the stocking. What about poor nephew's stocking? And I have a lot to say about that, because I am traumatized by it, and I need support, and I don't know how to get it. So anyway, there it is. Sweet little coat. Put that away. My other work in progress, which is coming along swimmingly, with no problems, is my Cameo by Paula P. I'm sorry, I knit this Highland Handmaids Beowulf singles, 100% wool on a size 9, which is what, a 5.5 millimeter. And I'm knitting that on my Knitter's Pride Interchangeables. This is the Cameo shawl by Paula P on Ravelry. And I'm knitting this with 13 Mile Farm yarn. And it is just a dream to work with. They have donated to our event, to the Highlands on the Fly retreat in October, and that's coming along. There is still a few spaces available if you're still interested in coming to Maine at all. Here it is. This is Midnight Lake and Sage Green. These are all natural dyed yarns. I happened to see this yarn featured in the Fleece and Fiber Sourcebook under the Border Leicester page, and I'm not 100% sure if this is Leicester, Border Leicester or not, but it's a long wool, makes me happy, so I'm just still working on the stripes. This may go to class with me this week. So this is going to be for submission, hopefully, to the Yarns at Yinhu Asymmetrical, hosted by Sarah Pomegranate, which is a great audio podcast that I savor. I savor a lot of podcasts, but some of them are video, and I can't do that while I'm driving. But I particularly like to listen to Sarah while I'm driving. Unfortunately, my husband really enjoys this podcast, so a lot of times I have to wait, reserve, or not tell him I've already listened to it. Tee-hee-hee, are you watching, honey? And then listen to it again with him, which isn't a problem, of course. So, Asymmetrical, I'm knitting this on, I think these are 5s. Curses, I think this is a 5, which in my little brain of metrics doesn't translate, which is a 3 3/4 millimeter. So US 5, 3 3/4 millimeter. 13 Mile Farm, Midnight Lake and Sage, and that is in my Mary Poppins bag. Sorry if it's getting blown out with the light. So, and I'm still working on the Good No by Bonnie Sennett. I'm knitting that on US 7s, which are 4.5 millimeter. I'm knitting that with Northern and Solstice alpaca yarn. It's right here. Pretty typical of me. Brown. And that is almost done. I just have to finish the sleeve and then pick up around the edging. I'm not going to show that to you. It's fairly large. I think I did last time. I haven't made much progress aside from finishing one sleeve and starting the next. So this is going to be skeined up tonight. And the stocking. I didn't bring it over here. I worked on it this morning. I was like, I'm going to do 10 rows today. And I'm feeling the pressure of the deadlines. I feel a little bit better now that I've got his coat done. I just have to pick up the edging. But I know I'm going to have to order more yarn. It feels big. It feels abnormally big, or it looks abnormally big to me. And I just cannot sit down and knit it. I'm so resistant to it. It's beautiful, but I got some work to do around that up here, and I don't know what that is. And if you have any suggestions for getting through a project that's slightly sloggy, aside from ripping it out, I thought about that. I just don't think ripping it out and not doing it is an option. And now, see, you're knitting for blood. I don't mean I'm like trade for blood. I'm knitting for family. And that just shifts the whole dynamic of, you know, what you can and can't do with the project. Or at least I'm feeling that around this particular project. I don't know what to do. And Christmas is coming. The geese are getting fat. And who will put a penny in the old man's hat? Is that how that goes? So anyway, I don't even want to think about that. I can't even think about it. It's coming. It's flying by. It's going to be October before I know it. And now I'm freaking out. You're like, settle down. So, I mean, I've even contemplated hiring somebody to finish knitting this for me. That's serious. That is serious business for a hand knitter. So anyway, if you have any ideas, let me know. PG tips tea. So I've had my little whinge about the stocking, and I'm apologizing for that because I've been talking about it for 2 episodes now, but obviously it's weighing on my mind. So how am I assuaging that? Of course, I'm doing other stuff, right? And one of the things I'm doing is I'm spinning. I'm preparing to spin. I have been sitting on this Border Leicester fleece since Maryland. I store my fleeces, this is in the raw, in Tractor Supply buckets, the lid swished down. This one has not been washed. It was 4 pounds, and from Hopping Acres and Brewston Mills, West Virginia. And this is Penelope Pit Stop, and she is a Leicester long wool. They have hoppingacres.com is their, and I, for a long time, was functioning under the auspices? Functioning under the thought that this was a Border Leicester, not a Leicester long wool. And I went and did my research so I could talk to you a little bit about this breed, and I was like, oh my God, Who knew? And what I learned was that the Leicester longwool is a critically endangered species, and for a brief period it was extinct in the US and was brought back over in the 90s by Colonial Williamsburg as part of a conservation project, and since has been cultivated by other breeders, obviously, in the States, obviously committed breeders. And in the British Isles, there are only about 400 breeding yows left, and that's a pretty significant reduction in number based on the history of it being one of the most prolific breeds in the British Isles. It is the foundation for a longwool family, and longwools, Border, Blueface, Leicester, the Romneys, they are known for their luster, their durability, and their staple length. And typically, these breeds were combed. They were raised to be combed into worsted yarn. Worsted in this case referring to the preparation and the spinning of all the fibers being aligned in perfect parallel entry into the twist. And yeah, it can come in a variety of colors. And one of the things that, I mean, this is 4 pounds, and the fleeces can average, I believe, up to, let me get my numbers right, up to 18 for a full year growth. So they have a half-year clip, potentially of 5.5 pounds, and a staple length of 5.5 inches, and a full year 18 pound and a 14 inch full length staple. So they are in natural colors, and you'll know, I purchased the gray, charcoal gray and brown. I did not get a white fleece. And adjectives to describe this fleece included crisp, robust, durable, and obviously that worsted weight, that texture, that long wool drape and durability lends itself to lace and texture as well, according to the Fleece and Fiber Sourcebook. I finished spinning a sample of the Coopsworth from Serenity Farm. That's still on the wheel, and this Leicester is going over top of it because I just couldn't wait to spin it. I had done a bunch of prep. But I will also, I'm going to grab another bobbin and spin, sorry, I'm looking at the J's out the window, and spin the rest of the samples that Serenity Farm sent me for the Coopsworth. I'll apply those and I'll add them to my breed-specific collection. But let's talk about preparation for the Leicester Longwool. Somebody commented on one of my Instagram posts, because I had been combing away, I just couldn't stop combing, about the prep and what I've done. Everything I've learned about fleece prep, I have learned from Judith McKenzie. I have her 3 bags full video and watch it quite a bit, and even while I'm prepping my fleece. So for the most part, the research I've done on preparation of fleece, I did the simple stuff like, you know, how to wash fleece and don't do a lot of agitation, etc. So I kind of had that basic working knowledge. I got that from the spinning book I showed you a while back from the 70s. But this I decided to wash in the lock per Judith's recommendation, because I wanted to comb it and I wanted to spin it worsted weight. My goal with this is to spin a heavy lace, light fingering, 2-ply to do a beautiful shawl out of. So I have a lot of fleece to work with here, so I'm sure I have a lot of practice. So what I did last weekend is I started stapling the fleece. I was pulling out lengths of the fleece and I was matching it into piles for length, so that like stapled lengths were all together. So when I combed it, I didn't have big chunks coming off below other chunks, etc. So, because when you go to diz off your combs, when you go to pull your fiber off your combs, the longest fibers will come off ahead of the shorter fibers. So I stapled it. Here's an example of the fleece. There's quite a bit of variability in the color. Staple length referring to, of course, the length of the fleece not stretched from where it was attached to the sheep to the tips here. So there she is. You can see some of that beautiful luster, I hope. Is it gonna focus for you? I can't tell. Anyway, yeah, there you go. You can see that telltale wave in the fiber. Would never describe this as blocky. Let me see if I can separate that out for you a little bit. This is the fleece in the raw. And it smells delicious. Grab this one. You may be able to see the luster on this. I can certainly see it, the shine. There, you can see that. I don't know. Hopefully you can. So, what I did is I then took these staples and I laid them out on a square piece of cotton and I folded them into little packets. And then I laid them basically like in a lasagna pan. And sorry, my hair. I laid them in a lasagna pan with some detergent. She goes at length into types of detergent. For this first round, I used the Unicorn Scour. This was one of the dirtiest fleeces I have ever experienced. You may have been a bit horrified that I was doing it in my kitchen, but these things don't bother me. So I then put it to simmer. I went right into hot water. I brought it to a simmer and I let it simmer for like 15, 20 minutes. Dumped it off, rinsed it in hot water, and rinsed it in hot water, and rinsed it in hot water, and then set it out to dry. When it came out of the packets, it was still in its staple. So it still looked like this. So no, it wasn't messed up, and it hadn't been, sometimes the ends felt together, which is fine. And then what I did is I picked up this dog brush at my local hardware store, and I flicked the tips out because they were a little gummy. I have my wood stove going for the second time, and it's slightly smoky in here, and it's not warm. But things are burning. I wonder if the wood's wet. So I flicked out my tips like that, just to make it easier for my combs to get through. And so when this is, basically representative of what the tip looks like, even when it comes out clean. The combs don't separate that. They don't grab in between. So here's my comb. So you end up with you can end up with chunks of that, and I found that by flicking out that fiber, I ended up, with less waste. So I load my combs with the tip side facing out and the butt end going down onto the comb. So combing is gonna have this aspect. All right. You probably could spin this right from the lock without too much trouble. I really wanted to blend the colors because I have light grays and charcoals and browns, so I was looking for consistency and uniformity in the yarn. I also wanted to break up the back of this a little bit and see if I could make that a little bit easier on my drafting capabilities. So I don't think I can. I don't have mini combs, which would be great. I've never combed in my lap with these big Viking combs. I have clamp. But basically I come in from the side and I grab it and twist down. And I have had my tetanus. Let's see if I can not pierce my thighs. I feel like Gene Wilder in Young Frankenstein when he's like with the scalpel. So there it is. And I come back in again and I grab it and I twist down and back in and I grab it and I twist down. Now I probably, I have a little water bottle next to my combing station with a little bit of rosemary or lavender oil in it. And I probably would spray that just to cut down a little bit on the static. And then I would take it off this comb. Anyway, this isn't the most perfect demonstration, but you get the idea and the movement of what I'm doing. So I probably would save that, but for our instances, then I'm going to take this and I'm going to diz it. I've been using this to diz because I want to get it small, so I've been dizzing through the number 2 on here. Basically, let's see, let me get it to a point. I'll show you the final outcome of stuff that I've actually done when I'm not trying to film the podcast. All right, so when I'm dizzing it, I can make this happen for you. I pull, and at the same time I'm taking this up, and here comes my carded top. And pull and move, and I'll pull and move, and there it is. All my fibers perfectly aligned into gorgeous fluff. It's easier to see it there. And then these are obviously longer because I have more loaded on. And then I just take them and I kind of pull it just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of gentle. And then that's my nest. So it's very enjoyable, it's very easy. Compared to the combing I was doing of a Shetland Corriedale cross, I really have been enjoying this this fleece much more. It is designed to be combed. The Shetland Corriedale had a mix of lengths of fibers and a mix of textures, and I did not sort that out. This is exceptionally uniform. So everything is combing the same, and I'm not getting chunks of shorter bits and longer bits and different, really truly different types of fiber. So I got these combs, my Viking combs, on Etsy from a maker in Ohio, and I love them and they're gorgeous, and I did not pay. I really wanted to get a pair of the St. Blaise combs just because he was martyred by using Viking combs, and I thought that was a great historical story. But I found these for a much better price for myself, and they're just as beautiful and handmade, and these are 2-pitch combs. So they have 2 sets, they have 2 rows of combs, and so the more pitches you have, the more trash and weak fibers you'll get out per pass. This I've done two passes on when I've combed it. So what have I come up with? Oh my good God. Look at that. This is 2 ounces. I'm going to do the 2-ply. And here it is in all of its glory of gray, shiny loveliness. So that's when I go to spin this, I'll pull the top of my nest out. I'll know that this is the tip end. Tip end will, I'm saying tip end being the end that deals with the environment. Tip end will go in and I will spin from the tip end to the butt. So the fiber is all going in one direction. And you can see how, hopefully, how gorgeous that is. So I have taken great pleasure in preparing this fleece, and I think I will take even more pleasure. Sorry, I'm going to have to fix it or it will bother me that it's not in its perfect state of nestness. Knowing that what a critically endangered breed it is. So I'm thinking if I can actually produce the yarn that I want with this, I would like to knit the Jared Flood, one of his permafrost with this, or there's another one of his that's in my queue, so kind of in the same vein. So yeah, so that's been really exciting and I've really enjoyed it. Speaking of spinning, I thought I would just do oh, this is the finished product. Sorry, I totally forgot I had this. Obviously not plied. I don't know if that's gonna work for you. Maybe not. Let's see if I can get this organized. Yes? Kind of? Maybe? Well, that's what I'm looking at for my single. And you're like, stop putzing. Nope, it's not gonna happen. Well, anyway, I'm sure you'll see some finished, hopefully some work done next time we speak. So I thought for Textiles in Time, pull up your knitting now, you don't have to look at anything, your drink of choice. I would talk a little bit about spinning wheels. We've talked about spindling on drop spindles and other variations of that tool was happening for 9,000 years. And everything was spun on drop spindles. Sailing cloth, we've talked about this historical. One thing that they mentioned was, of course, the wraps for mummies, spun on drop spindles. So how that kind of percolated through all of the kind of our relationship with history of mummies or Columbus or, you know, the emperors in China, like their textiles were all going to be derived from those spindles. When we see the spinning wheel enter into history, we don't have any documentable evidence aside from some written evidence of the earliest spinning wheels going to be in China in approximately 1270, right? And I'm sorry, the written evidence of spinning wheels was in Persia in 1297. I think it was after Common Era, AD, and linguistic evidence that they're coming from India. And our earliest known artwork depiction comes from China in 1270. And it wouldn't be a wheel that necessarily would be associated with our castle-style wheels or our Saxony-style wheels that we picture in our head of, you know, kind of that historical spinning wheel. They would have been more reminiscent of the charka, and that is a type of spinning contraption that you would maybe associate if you have seen pictures of Gandhi spinning cotton in the revolution that took place during the 30s and the 40s. I believe that was his time frame. So when I'm talking about the precursor to the spinning wheels that we're familiar with, we should be thinking more about charkas. Charkas would have easily migrated and been passed back and forth, Persia, India, China, that Silk Road route. We're looking at the time period here, the Middle Ages and early Renaissance. So what's happening at that time period in Europe? And I know we're focusing on Europe and Asia. That time period is going to be classified by the Gothic era. By this time, by 1297, the Crusades would just have been ending. So when we start to see that spinning wheel entering into Europe, the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance. Chartres would have been built, Notre Dame would have been built, Westminster was built, Salisbury. We're on the eve of the plague as the spinning wheels are coming into Europe and shifting along those trade routes. Magna Carta would have been signed, Dante would have written the Inferno. So our crusades would have been about 1000 to 1100. So there's a lot of population shift and a lot of idea sharing happening at this time period. I used an online resource for this, but the woman who had written the essay was gathering a lot of her information from Spinning Wheels, Spinners, and Spinning by Patricia Baines. And that's kind of where I came up with some of the written evidence, linguistic evidence, and the picture evidence coming out of India and China, or what would have been. The wheels at that point were not rimmed. They were attached. They were spokes that were attached by zigzagged string, and they were hand cranked. So again, reminiscent of that Charka technology. We have a mention of spindle wheels in Speyer, which would have been Germany in 1298. So we're starting to see it moving into Europe. It actually was forbidding the use of wheel-spun warp thread in weaving. And one of the things that wheels enabled people to do was to spin softer yarns, because they weren't being spun they were being spun with less gravity and with less twist. So the wheels are going to shift the technology of the weaving textile. It's going to shift of course, the production and capability, and it's also going to shift how we understand yarn and how we understand textiles and what we choose to create with it. If you're interested in learning more about Charka and some more of the technical elements of spinning, you can check out Malia. Her podcast is Yarn Raising. She's got quite a bit of information and knowledgeable about the technicality and the use of, I know she uses a charka to spin. So I would encourage you to check out her podcast if you'd like to learn more. This is just kind of like a, can you believe that? Kind of textiles in time. I do want to remind you that even into 1298, everything is still hand cranked. So the treadle is not going to really, there is no documentable evidence of when that actually entered into the technology. So the earliest documentable evidence of a spinning wheel, spinning wool, was in Britain in the 14th century. And it was in a manuscript, it was an illustrated manuscript, what they call the Decretals of Gregory the Ninth. And it's a picture of a woman carding, combing, and spinning wool on a wheel. So that's where we start to see, for Europe, the earliest documentation. The earliest known flyer wheel was a picture in South Germany, 1475 to 1480. And we do know that Leonardo da Vinci took a turn at doing some designing work for the spinning wheel. But again, things are still going to be hand cranked. So just something really interesting to think about. I've been thinking about spinning wheel technology. I kind of knew that spinning wheels didn't really come about until the early Renaissance. So if you're looking at 1475 to 1480 with widespread use across the major continents of Europe, in Asia, then you're looking at what, 14, so let's say 1500. So we're looking at about 500 years of technology, which compared to the 9,000 years of the drop spindle. Just fascinating to me. So it's very, very, very new in the way of production, and of course then we move to the big spinning mills. So anyway, if you're interested in learning more, I'll post a link to the essay that I read. I think I'm going to pick up that book by Patricia Baines if it's still available, and if there's still stuff to talk about, or people still have questions, they can certainly post them to the Ravelry group. But again, I would encourage you to check out the Yarn Raising podcast. Let's see. I think it's time for a fond farewell. I will hopefully be back next week. I don't know how much I'll have done, but I will be bringing Morgan for entertainment value. And if that doesn't work, it would be 2 weeks from now. I have Fiber Trek to organize, and I need to get on that, and I have anxiety about it, but I've talked to Tyler, and we're both on board, and we're both committed, and we're just going to make it happen. I do know that the Twin Set Designs podcast, which is another one of my favorite audio podcasts, I had sent them a link to the first episode, and just wanted to get it out there. They had been talking a little bit about slow fashion and some of the elements that I'm working towards, and they did a very nice shout out on their audio, and I very much appreciate that, and offered some very nice insight into ways to make it more accessible and things that we should focus on. So it wasn't my mother offering this perspective, and it wasn't my husband offering this perspective. It was somebody else who shared a common endeavor. So that was very, very helpful, and I very much appreciate that. So, with that being said, I'm just checking my notes here. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you, for those of you who are interested in historical fiction, and kind of the late Middle Ages, if you have the stamina to check out Pillars of the Earth, I listened to it on audio tape. And it was a very frustrating listen for a variety of reasons, one of them being William. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there is a wool element to it, and it does very much speak to the daily life and ins and outs of to Britain during the early Middle Ages, and it is all centralized around the building of a cathedral. What's the guy's name who wrote Pillars of the Earth? Can't remember. Very famous author. Sorry. I blocked it out after my trauma with that one character. But I would recommend that if you have a strong interest in intense historical fiction of that time period, then that was a book that I had found interesting that had talked about the wool business and the wool merchants. So with that recommendation, I'm going to say a fond farewell. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.